Either we heal as a team, or we're going to crumble. Inch by inch, play by play, till we're finished. We're in hell right now, gentlemen, believe me. And we can stay here, get the shit kicked out of us, or we can fight our way back into the light. We can climb out of hell. 1 inch at a time. You know, when you get old in life, things get taken from you. I mean, that's part of life. But you only learn that when you start losing stuff. You find out life's this game of inches. So is football. Because in either game, life or football, the margin for error is so small. I mean, 1/2 a step too late or too early, and you don't quite make it. 1/2 second too slow, too fast, you don't quite catch it. The inches we need are everywhere around us. They're in every break of the game, every minute, every second. On this team, we fight for that inch. On this team, we tear ourselves and everyone else around us to pieces for that inch. We claw our fingernails for that inch. Because we know when we add up all those inches, that's going to make the fucking difference between winning and losing. Between living and dying. I'll tell you this, in any fight, it's the guy who's willing to die who's going to win that inch. And I know if I'm going to have any life anymore, it's because I'm still willing to fight and die for that inch. Because that's what living is. There's 6 inches in front of your face. Now I can't make you do it. You got to look at the guy next to you. Look into his eyes. Now I think you're going to see a guy who will go that inch with you. You're going to see a guy who will sacrifice himself for this team because he knows when it comes down to it, you're going to do the same for him. That's the team, gentlemen. And either we heal now as a team, or we will die as individuals.
Ideas are bulletproof.
Welcome to the show. It is September 21st, 2011. This is Down the Rabbit Hole. I'm your host, Popeye from FederalJack.com. Today I got a special show for you planned. Last Wednesday I had my buddy Steve Stars on, and we covered the assassination of John F. Kennedy Jr. And I promised you that this week we would be covering the assassination of Robert F. Kennedy. Now, out of all the assassinations, political assassinations in the 60s, Bobby Kennedy's is like the least talked about. And I think the reason why is because if anybody actually goes and spends 5 minutes investigating it, you can see that it's just, the official story is just horse crap. And when you look at the defense, Sirhan's defense, and you can't just look at it from a topical, and just take a quick topical, look at it and say, well, Sirhan's crazy and he was a lone gunman. You have to look at certain aspects of it, like the fact that at the very last minute, Bobby's whole little, I guess I don't want to say evacuation plan, but when they left the podium, they were supposed to go one way to the conference room where he was going to, I guess, hold a press conference or whatever, and he or perhaps a meeting, whatever, and he didn't go the way that they were supposed to go. He got grabbed at the last minute and by certain staff members, which Steve's back with me today, and we'll be naming the staff members and everybody, and we'll be getting into it. But like, he got led into the killing zone at the very last minute by a last minute change, which is the same way they took his brother out onto Elm Street. It was changed at the very last minute by the mayor of Dallas, whose brother just happened to get fired by John F. Kennedy. But no, there's nothing shady, or there's nothing shady there. There's no conflict of interest there. There's no, I should just go back to sleep and watch Dancing with the Stars, right? Well, right. I won't, and that's why I get people like Steve to come back, because Steve's a hardcore researcher when it comes to the assassination of the Kennedy family, especially with the two brothers and the son, mainly the three of them, John Jr., Jack, and Bobby. And Steve knows a lot about RFK's death that not many other researchers do, because not many people realize, unless you investigate Bobby Kennedy's death, you don't even, you don't know, because it's not even in the alternative news media, it's not talked about. So that's why I'm covering it today. So without wasting any more time, Steve, the best way I guess I could sum up Bobby is that after his brother's death, I mean, he was kind of a little prick before his brother's death. I mean, he was a hardcore prosecutor and everything, but I think after his brother's death, he was a changed man.
Yeah, that's one of the things of the documentary. RFK Must Die points out that he really had to step up to the plate, and it probably was a reluctant moment for him. He was under shock, I'm sure, as all of us were. You're inside the cabinet. There was a lot of heavy stuff going on with the Cuban Missile Crisis, a number of other very serious issues, civil rights, of course. Martin Luther King had died earlier. It was the Vietnam War was raging. And, he really had to step up and man up at that time, and I think that's what he was doing. He was kind of a shy kid, they said. Really, he wasn't an outgoing kind of a brass tacks person or an individual. But, he was looking to do whatever he could. And, this was his opportunity. The country needed him, and he was ready to step in and see what he could do to try and stop all this madness that was going on.
It's just come out recently that he was going to run with Martin Luther King Jr. as his running mate for president. Can you imagine, Bobby Kennedy, a white guy, running with Martin Luther King, a well-spoken, well-educated black man? The two of them, they would have talk about shattering paradigms and but it would have, been, I think it would have been a good ticket, because it would have, the powers that be couldn't have that. Can you imagine you got these two guys that are completely against the war in Vietnam and against all, poverty around the world? Because both of them wanted to, feed starving kids. And see, King, it's a misnomer that King was killed because, he got blacks the right to vote.
Wrong.
They thought that was going to appease him and shut him up. He started talking about not only black people in America, but black people in Africa, and not just black people, but white people, poor people. He started talking about the haves versus the have-nots, the elitists, versus all the poor people and oppressed people around the world. He started talking about the Vietnam War being bad, and that was it. Then they killed him because he started talking smack against the Vietnam War, and RFK was the same way. And look, to put it into perspective, I'm going to play a quick 2-minute clip of Bobby. This is Bobby speaking on the death about the death of Martin Luther King. Okay, and he had learned it while he was about to go speak to this crowd of black people, and they found out from Bobby, and just the way he speaks to them. Check this out.
Tonight at approximately 8 p.m., the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was shot and killed while standing on a balcony in Memphis, Tennessee. The news is spreading like a shockwave through the ghettos of the South.
As American cities burned, Robert Kennedy stepped forward to heal a divided nation.
When King was killed, Kennedy was to speak to a and they didn't know that King had been shot. God knows that they could have had guns and they would have been violent. He stepped up to this young, white, privileged guy, and he said, I have bad news to tell you. Martin Luther King has been killed in Memphis. And this, goes over the crowd.
For those of you who are black and are tempted to be filled with hatred and distrust of the injustice of such an act against all white people, I would only say that I can also feel in my own heart the same kind of feeling. I had a member of my family killed but he was killed by a white man. My favorite poet was Aeschylus. He once wrote, "Even in our sleep, pain which cannot forget falls drop by drop upon the heart, until in our own despair, against our will, comes wisdom through the awful grace of God." What we need in the United States is not violence and lawlessness, but is love and wisdom and compassion toward one another, feeling of justice toward those who still suffer within our country, whether they be white or whether they be black.
And that's why they killed RFK. We'll be right back, guys. We are back. I got cut off before with the by the bumper, but I wanted to play you how he reacted and how he spoke to a very angry black community about King's death. And here's this white privileged guy going up, and he had the balls to go up and talk to them, and he was very civil and very he presented himself very well, and he wasn't lynched or attacked or anything. They respected him for that. You know, Bobby had something that nobody else had. When Cesar Chavez, I'm pronouncing his. I think it was Cesar Chavez, right? The Mexican rights worker. Yeah, he got like 200 or over 200,000 new voters registered, and these people were lined up, before the doors even opened, at these polling places to vote for Bobby Kennedy in these primaries. And they've never been able to duplicate that since, not even with Obozo. They shipped people in for Obama, but this wasn't shipping people in. This was literally, you want to talk about grassroots. It was these Mexican workers that were here, okay, and they weren't, this wasn't a case of, they're all illegals. These were people that were here legally, but they were just being used, or people that were immigrant workers that were here through, on a work visa or whatever, and they were getting taken advantage of, and they didn't want to, be taken advantage of. People that were here anybody that was here that could affect change, that was allowed to legally vote, okay, I should say. Right. It wasn't like they were getting illegal voters, but these were legal. It wasn't like they do now with, the illegals and everything else, and, you can vote 18 times under an assumed name. He actually got these people because he inspired them, because, Chavez looked at him and said, well, this guy really, he's trying to bring attention to what's going on with the migrant workers, and, he's trying to bring attention to what's going on with, Mexicans here in the United States, and it's pretty much minorities. Kennedy was bringing, after his brother died, I'm telling you, he was a changed man. I think he realized that Johnson killed his brother. He knew that he was involved in it. He asked, there's that famous picture of him where he's showing Johnson something, and Johnson's face is, of like complete mortification. And the photographer was asked what was said, and Bobby said to Johnson, "Why'd you have my brother killed?" And he showed him something. I don't know what he had. Who knows? Maybe, remember, it's been postulated that John Jr. had evidence and paperwork to support the fact. You got to wonder if maybe that was Uncle Bobby's stuff that Bobby had unearthed while he was still alive between 63 and 68 when they blew his head off.
Yeah. There was evidently a real threat of Bobby Kennedy coming in to take over in the government. And as we pointed out before, this is what's happening so consistently in the United States history of politics, that we have had politically motivated assassinations going back, I'm sure, all the way to Lincoln, but probably even before that to Zach Taylor and Harrison. Very early on, when we were fighting issues with the banks and international control, it's been there all this time. This is really be honest with you, it's sad to say, nothing new. And we're seeing it all the time. We just saw it recently in 1999 with John F. Kennedy Jr. Obviously, Bobby Kennedy posed a real threat to the military-industrial complex, just like his brother John did. And they had to get rid of him. And this is one of the reasons why we're doing this show, Popeye, as you know. I mean, we are in the same kinds of time right now. And Ron Paul, who some people may fully endorse and others may not feel as strongly towards, at least we have to admit one thing. He is a...
I think you're back, Steve.
I think he needs to...
You got cut off for a second. Go back because you got cut off for a second. You got cut off when you were talking about Ron Paul. What you said, you called him something and it cut you off. So what did you say he was?
Oh, I said a lot of people either support him fully or maybe not as enthusiastically, but the reality is he is a threat to this system.
Oh, without a doubt, he's a threat because he's injecting real issues into the debate. He's causing these other candidates to try to pretend to be him. You know, you got Michelle Bachmann and Rick Perry and Newt Gingrich all trying to be Ron Paul. How pathetic is that? I'm not saying Ron Paul's pathetic. I'm saying it's pathetic that these guys are just complete losers. Oh, by the way, not to get off subject because I want to stay on, we're doing tonight's RFK assassination, but there's a new theory about why the towers fell down. Apparently the explosions, now they're admitting there were explosions in the towers, and it was caused by water and melted aluminum from the airplanes reacting with each other, and that's what brought down the towers and turned everything into dust. But it wasn't controlled demolition, Steve. No.
Yeah, they start to hedge a little bit here and there, and of course, 5 to 10 years down the road, you start to get all this information. But the key thing is in the real-time aspect of affecting things, Popeye, that's what you and I are doing with all these shows. We're talking about what's happening, not because we want to, freak people out with all this bad news, but to give them a good indication of exactly where we are right now.
Yeah, if people understand what's going on, we can fix it. It's like going to the hospital and getting a diagnosis, dude. Would you rather get a diagnosis and get the problem taken care of, or do you want the doctor to pat you on the head and say, it's okay, don't worry, it's okay, everything's okay, don't worry, and then you die. Right. So, what's more useful? You know what I mean? I would say let's get it on and get this crap out and get it over with. Getting back to RFK, it's important for people to understand, Bobby really, he pissed off. Lyndon didn't like him. He pissed off Lyndon Johnson even when his brother was the president. And if John wasn't killed, Johnson would not have been on the ticket for the second, term, and he probably would have been arrested for his nefarious dealings. And Bobby would have gone after him and prosecuted him. Hence the reason why they had to kill him in '68, because Lyndon, and it's not the only reason, but another deciding factor, as it were, because he would have most surely gone after Lyndon Johnson for his brother's murder, and he knew that Johnson was involved. And if he was the president and Johnson was no longer the president because Johnson wasn't going to run, he definitely, can you imagine if RFK became the president, Johnson gets out, they do the whole thing, and then 2 weeks later he sicks his attorney general on Johnson and his former administration, and he starts rounding them up for assassinating the president of the United States. I mean, that would go back, through Big Oil, Clint Murchison, all these dirty dealings the entire time that Johnson was in office. The fact that Hoover covered it up, it couldn't happen. They couldn't allow him to get in office. Just no way about it. Because they can't kill Bobby. Can you imagine if he gets to be the president? What are they going to do? Blow Bobby's head off while he's the president again? Yeah, then they really will. People really, they would realize there was a conspiracy. What are you going to do? Blame that one on a lone nutbag? It's easier to shoot him before he gets in, when he's a lowly little candidate, and blame some BS reason like they did. Sirhan was blamed for shooting him because he was going to sell bombers to Israel, and Sirhan had survived during the 6 Day War, and they had lived through bombings and stuff. He was a Palestinian. And he had survived bombings from Israeli warplanes, so the kid was shell shocked. But that's not what caused him to kill Kennedy. That was just when you're programmed, and we're going to get into that. When you're programmed, they can access little things like that. And that that in itself created almost like a little trauma pocket. Like these little, when our bodies experience trauma, our brains try to compartmentalize it. And that's how they managed to create all these multiple personalities. Multiple personality disorder never existed until they started doing mind control experiments and fracturing people's psyches into little pieces. And this stuff goes back to the Nazis especially. Were working on this during World War II. They were taking people that they had in the camps and stuff, and they were doing experiments on them with this stuff. It's really sick and twisted. But yes, it goes back very far. We get back, we'll get more into Sirhan. We are back. Before we go any further, I want to make sure you guys get a pen and a piece of paper and write down 2 names, okay? Go get a pen and a piece of paper. I'll give you like 5 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Write down the assassination of RFK, which you can look up on YouTube, or go to my YouTube channel. The answer to 1984 is, and there's the full-length upload of it. It's an older documentary about it. And try to find on Netflix, or if you can find a DVD and purchase it, get the DVD. And even if you like reading, get the book that the filmmaker wrote. Shane, he wrote a book about investigating RFK, because he spent like 5 years investigating the assassination. But he made a movie called RFK Must Die. You can check out the website. Check his movie out. Out of both documentaries, Shane's is loaded with information, and the DVD has some extras and stuff on it. He really did a fantastic job. Now, I've never met him. He doesn't pay me any money to promote his movie, but it's a really good documentary. In fact, I'm trying to get in touch with him, which is really hard, but I'm trying to get in touch with him to get him on the show. Now, I say to watch these 2 movies because there's nothing I could not fit into the 2 hours I do my show, all the information. In fact, I've watched the movie probably about 15 times, and every time I watch it, I always pick something else up, so it's just the way it is. Steve himself has watched it a couple times, and he'll tell you the same thing. There's just so much information. It's like 5 years of this guy's research into the assassination of RFK. So it's important so that you have the videos so you can see them yourself. So YouTube, the assassination of RFK, and then RFK Must Die. Now, I don't know if you'll be able to find it on the internet, because it's he does the copyright thing when people try to put it up on YouTube, so it might have been yanked. But I know the assassination of RFK is up on YouTube because I uploaded it. RFK Must Die, you might have to buy it, but it's worth to have it. And if you get the book too, I would suggest you get the book. It's a very, very good investigation, and probably one of the only in-depth investigations into Bobby Kennedy's assassination. Now, Sirhan himself, and even to this day, he was just on the news, what was it, Steve, like 5-6 months ago? And they were talking about his parole, and they said something about they were thinking about maybe giving him parole, and of course then he's not going to get parole. But they always say he doesn't give parole. They won't give him parole because he doesn't show any remorse for doing what he did. And Sirhan has said to them, "How can I feel remorse when I don't remember doing it?" Yeah. How he was completely controlled, and you know what I mean. You know exactly what I'm talking about. In fact, in RFK Must Die, they interview his brother, and his brother his brother says to them the same thing. How is he supposed to? He doesn't remember doing it. Of course, he doesn't have any remorse. If you're programmed to not remember it, which leads me to what Steve and I were talking about before we went into the break. He was highly programmable, and he was hypnotizing himself with the fish weight and everything else, right? He had joined the Rosicrucian order, and he was hypnotizing himself, and he kept writing over and over in his notebook, "RFK must die, RFK must die," which Dr. Diamond, who's a psychiatrist, and he does hypnotherapy and all this other stuff. He was the psychiatrist that the defense used. This guy said that was the way that he kept reinforcing the programming in his head, was by repetition and writing it writing it over and over again in a notebook. And you know what they say, right, Steve? Repetition is the greatest form of mind control.
Yeah, it's definitely something that was all a part of the mixture here. Of course, we know that there was a description of Sirhan. Sirhan, in many ways, one of the guys said, look, he wasn't a big burly fellow. He was a chicken poop, to put it in the more clean terms. He wasn't anybody tough. He wasn't a ferocious kind of a guy. He'd had a horse riding accident. Remember Popeye, when he was trying to be a horse jockey? So you can imagine how big he was if he was trying to ride horses as a jockey. The lighter you are, the better you are. And so he'd had a horse riding accident and had a brain injury. And his brother talks about this. Of course, these are people from, I guess, I'm not sure where they're originally from. I think Lebanon, but these are not like hardcore Muslims or Bible believing Palestinian types.
I thought they were Palestinians, but they might have been Lebanese. But it's one of the two territories that gets the shit blown out of it by Israel.
Yeah, and so as a result, he was framed to be this Islamic terrorist, and yet what we find is like kind of a skinny and scrawny little kid who wanted to be a horse jockey for a horse riding.
He weighed like 100 pounds. Now this is important for later on, but remember this. Sirhan only weighed like 100 pounds.
Yeah, he wasn't a big guy, and
or maybe like 110 pounds. He was very light and very skinny.
This brain injury that he had really left him susceptible to recovery. I mean, when you have a brain injury, you really have to have people lead you through the gates of life. I mean, it's not like you're going to come back and, be a rocket scientist in most cases. I mean, people have a hard time recovering from head injuries.
Well, that's why his brother said that it was out of character for him to be an assassin because he just didn't have it in him. And that, he was the kind of guy that if the three of you were sitting in a room, his brother, you, and Sirhan, and a fly flew in, your first thing, your first instinct would be to get up and smack it with a fly swatter, and so would he. But Sirhan would get up and open the door and try to shush the fly out the door because that's the kind of person he is. He doesn't... He's not into death or violence. It's just not his thing. So it's very out of character for him to do what he did. And then when you go, you have to watch the movie RFK Must Die to see like the 25 minutes of evidence alone, about how the doctors and stuff, and they show you how easily he was programmed. And it's like I was telling you, off air earlier, the one doctor, it was Dr. Diamond, he was showing, I forget the name of the, Robert Blair Kaiser was he was a defense investigator, and he wrote a book about this. But he was in there with Dr. Diamond in the cell with Sirhan, and he watched Diamond program Sirhan so that when Diamond blew his nose, Sirhan would climb the bars of his cell like a monkey. And then he snapped his fingers, whatever, and then they were talking, have a normal conversation, and all of a sudden, not Dr. Diamond, Robert Blair Kaiser. Kaiser noticed that Sirhan was climbing the bars of his cell like a monkey. And I said, a monkey, going around in like a jungle gym or whatever. And he said to him, what are you doing? And at the same time, he looked over and realized that Dr. Diamond was blowing his nose. And when they asked Sirhan, what are you doing? Why are you climbing the bars of your cell? Why are you doing that? And he said, I'm just doing it for exercise, I guess. Like, he had no idea as to why he was climbing the cell bars. But he was just programmed in front of Kaiser by Dr. Diamond to do it. So this dude just witnessed how easily Sirhan could be programmed. I mean, this was one of the investigators for his defense team. Right. And he got found guilty, obviously, because it's an open and shut case. See, with Oswald, nobody saw Oswald shoot the rifle, so making him a patsy, there was a lot of this questioning and back and forth, and it was quoted as somebody in the police department in the LAPD said this isn't going to be another Dallas. But it's easier if you program somebody to just stand there and shoot a gun. It doesn't matter if he hits Kennedy. You have somebody come up, and cap him in the back of the head at close range, and he's dead. But everybody's focused on, Sirhan shooting a gun. So it's not like it's almost like you're using Sirhan as a straw man. Everybody's focused on that. Nobody's focused on you, and you come up and pop, pop, pop. Okay, that it's misdirection. Okay, any good magician, will tell you that's how they do tricks: sleight of hand and misdirection. And it's the same thing they did with that. Everybody's focused on Sirhan squeezing the trigger, shooting. That it doesn't matter if someone pulls their gun out from behind and shoots somebody in the back of the head, because that's how Kennedy died, and we'll get into that. He got shot behind the right ear, 1 inch away, and Sirhan was in the front of him from, like 3 feet away. But hey, just like the magic bullet, I guess physics, the magic bullet in 9/11, physics just does not matter.
Right.
We're getting cut off by the break. We'll be right back. I'm serious. Go look into this. Go check out RFK Must Die. Great documentary. We'll be right back.
Pretend to be free till you die a slave, a soldier in the desert searching for a ghost in the cave for the corporation. I run out of patience, sick of seeing troops sink to die for your lives, spending dollars in debt. We holler in protest till we have your arrest. We will not rest, and we know what you did that day.
Killed your own citizens to advance your ways, you scumbags. 9/11 was an inside job. Say it loud. Shout in people's faces, because things aren't going to change until we accept that fact and move on. And as Steve has said before, 9/11's a linchpin, guys. We really need to. It's important because if we can show them if we can show everybody the truth about 9/11, the rest of the charade falls down to the ground into its own footprint at free fall speed. Getting back into, I hear Steve in the background. Right on. Getting back into RFK, Steve, for the listeners, give them a quick intro. I'm going to play, it's about a 6-minute clip. It's from the movie RFK Must Die, but it's important because this is something that gets cut out all the time, and this is something that they brushed off that, it didn't exist, didn't happen. But the girl in the polka dot dress, she was seen by a few people, but the first most notable is a woman named Sandra Serrano, who at the time was a young girl, probably in her early 20s. But she was pretty much harassed by an agent. What was he? A U.S. Marshal, or was he FBI?
He was former CIA.
Oh, that's what he was. Okay.
Right, yes, and he'd been out of the country for some time. So you can imagine how somebody who had been out of the country for a while working at a foreign operation, which was a storefront operation for the CIA, how does he all of a sudden become a top investigator and interviewer of persons who saw things that were somewhat questionable about the whole assassination? So Hank Hernandez comes in, and what you hear in this interview, in my opinion, Popeye, this is a Jesuit-styled CIA Catholics in Action Inquisition interview. I mean, you can hear this whole thing start. He begins talking about how he's a Catholic. Are you a practicing Catholic, Sandy? In the name of Kennedy, you've got to listen to what we're saying here. In other words, she's already being programmed and trying to be manipulated by this guy. He is a former CIA.
Yeah, and she even says it. That's why it's like a 6-minute long clip, because it's you hear the whole thing about the polka dot dress, but you hear, and it wasn't just that too. They put her in a room filled with all different types of polka dot dresses to confuse her, and that screws with your memory, because then you start seeing the dresses, and then you start to question in your head, and it blurs everything, and that's what they were trying to do. So let me play this clip really quick. But that's what Steve's talking about. Hank Hernandez was really good at this, and you'll hear his interview, what Steve just quoted when he said, for the love of Kennedy. It's in here. I mean, he's not making that up. That's exactly what this guy says to Sandra Serrano. Check it out. It's like Steve says, would you call them Catholics in Action?
Yeah.
Girl in the polka dot dress. 20-year-old Kennedy volunteer Sandra Serrano was sitting outside in a fire escape when she saw two people fleeing the scene.
They're just thinking about how many people there were and how wonderful it was. Then this girl came running down the stairs in the back, and said, "We've shot him, we've shot him." And I said, "Who did you shoot?" And she says, "We shot Senator Kennedy." A boy came down with her. He was about 23 years old, and he was Mexican-American, because I can remember that because I'm Mexican-American. She had on a white dress with polka dots. She was light-skinned, dark hair, and she has a funny nose. I thought it was really funny. All my friends tell me I'm so observant.
After nearly 40 years, Sandra kindly agreed to her first interview since the night of the shooting.
It was very claustrophobic in the ballroom. You could barely move. I just stepped out onto the fire escape and a little balcony attached. While I was sitting there, 3 people passed by, a woman and 2 men. And the woman, I remember, was definitely an Anglo. And at the time, I thought both men were Latinos. They went in and said, "Excuse me," very polite. Then a little later, 2 of them came out and like tripping over each other and tripping over me. And I said, "What happened?" They said, we shot him. I said, "You shot who?" And they said, "The senator." And I said, "What?" And then I remember going into the ballroom and everything was chaotic, absolutely chaotic. I remember very distinctively that she was wearing a white dress with black polka dots, like a little ruffle around the collar, like a bib top, sort of. Dark hair, definitely, like a little pixie kind of cut, and a nose that sort of like Bob Hope, Richard Nixon kind of nose, a little bit ski. There's certain things about what happened that day that I will never forget. And the statement, we shot him, I'll never forget that. So I'm very clear in my mind that that's what was said. Both guys actually were short.
A guy in a gold sweater went up and down with the girl, but the second man didn't come down. Sandra described him as a white male, 23 years old, 5'3", with curly bushy hair in light-coloured clothes. After seeing the picture of Sirhan in the newspaper, she felt certain this was the same person.
That's what it was, seeing the photograph in the LA Times, and I said, wow, it really does look like that guy.
The FBI asked why she hadn't mentioned Sirhan on TV, even though Sirhan hadn't been identified at that point.
I distinctly remember feeling like they were trying to drive me crazy, to say that I was mentally unstable. They had hung 10 to 12 polka dot dresses in a room and left me there in this room with all these polka dot dresses all hanging around. And then coming in and asking me what dress most looks like the dress that the girl wore. Were the polka dots the size of a nickel? Were they the size of a dime? Were they the size of a quarter? You know, it was like you're trying to confuse the person.
As Serrano stuck to her story, Sergeant Enrique Hank Hernandez was brought in to give her a polygraph test.
He was a very frightening person. And he was like some Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde type, you know. One minute he was just like really, really nice and soft-spoken, like a wonderful big brother. And then the next minute he was like, you know, you're an awful person and you're hurting the Kennedys.
I think those people. No, Sandy. Remember what I told you about that? You can't say you saw something when you didn't see it. Sandy, look, I can explain this to the investigators where you don't even have to talk to them and they won't talk to you. I can do this. But please, in the name of Kennedy. I've never seen a girl. No, I'm talking about what you have told here about saying a person tell you we have shot Kennedy, and that's wrong. No, it isn't, Sandy. Look, I love this man, and you're shaming right now. He can't even. Well, I'm trying not to shout, but this is a very emotional thing with me too. You see, if you love the man, the least you owe him is a courtesy of letting him rest in peace.
I felt like I was a criminal. That's my best description. I felt like I was a criminal and I had done something wrong. You didn't do that. You didn't see that. You weren't there. You know, you're making all of this up. Why are you doing this? Just a lot of browbeating. So, you know, during later years, it crosses your mind. Why did they invest so much in beating you up? If there was nothing there, why did they beat you up so much? I remember thinking that he was lying. And then thinking, no, he can't lie. He's the police. The police don't lie.
Finally, Hernandez wore Serrano down.
I remember saying to him, whatever you want me to say, I'll say. Okay? I'm not here to hurt anybody. I don't want to do anything bad. So whatever you want me to say, I'll say. And they were the cops. They were the good guys.
Hernandez pressured Serrano into a retraction and concluded she had never seen Sirhan in person and had fabricated, for some unknown reason, the girl in the polka dot dress.
Someone in the LAPD said that there was not going to be another Dallas. They were going to wrap it up real quick. And so I remember when I read that and talking to my uncle and aunt who I lived with at the time, we all sort of said, yeah, right, you know, maybe that's why they were so hard on you.
There you go. Now that's right from Sandra Serrano herself. You heard when Steve did his little impersonation a couple minutes ago, you could see he wasn't making that up. That was the actual interview you heard of Hank Hernandez and her, Sandra Serrano. And you heard how he was badgering her. Please, for the love of Kennedy, if you love this man, you have to tell the truth. She was. But you see how she was badgered? Because they weren't worried about recording the truth. They were worried about burying the truth. So they had to make sure they browbeat people. I mean, if he was really concerned as an officer or a federal agent and somebody investigating the assassination of a senator who was running for president, you would think the guy would be sitting down with his notepad and asking questions and writing down and taking notes. But instead, he was trying to blur the facts and tell her what she didn't see. He's like, remember, you heard him say, remember, I told you what you didn't see that. How is that questioning? That's not being an investigator. Steve, if I come to you and you witness something and you say, well, Popeye, I saw that guy shoot that guy, and I say, no, you didn't. Is that being an investigator? Is that's screwing with the investigation, is it not?
Exactly. The key thing, Popeye, is that the girl in the polka dot dress is the key to all of this, and that's what they're trying to keep covered, because this was the Queen of Hearts. So remember that from the Manchurian Candidate? This is how they did it.
Exactly. She was one of the handlers, and there's speculation from what I've researched that she was probably mind controlled herself. We're going to break. We'll be back in a few minutes with hour number 2. Stay tuned. More on the RFK assassination. Welcome back, guys. It is hour number 2 of Down the Rabbit Hole. I'm your host, Popeye, from FederalJack.com. I'm joined by my buddy, Steve Stars. Steve, before we get into it, give everybody a place they can go see your movie about AIDS, and give them the info about your website and everything else.
Yeah, thanks, Popeye. If they want to see my documentary on HIV equals AIDS, fact or fraud, ask questions that you should be asking about the whole HIV/AIDS issue. It's gone around the world. It went viral. When Google came out, our film just shot up the charts, and people were saying, why haven't I ever seen this before? And of course, your listeners are probably very well acquainted with why people don't see things that they should be seeing. But you can go to our website, AIDS Fraud Video, AIDSFraudVideo.com, and you can watch it for free there. There's a link. Actually, there's a 20-minute teaser on the front page, and then if you click on the there's a link there that takes you to the full thing. If you want to watch it on the internet, that's fine. It's free. It doesn't cost you anything. If you do want a DVD or a copy of it, we'll send you out a copy of 9/11 Mysteries and some other things courtesy of Popeye that I have. I try to stuff these things. I'm just like Popeye when I get this information out. Every time I contact somebody, I consider it a privilege to send as much information as I possibly can. So you can get the DVD for those. It's $14.95, includes your shipping to the U.S., a little more outside the country. But we show you 10 reasons why HIV is not the cause of AIDS, what the real causes actually are, and why the toxic drugs like AZT, which are DNA chain terminators, cause AIDS by prescription. And, of course, who's behind all of this? which is the topic of what we're talking about tonight with Bobby Kennedy. Just visit our website, AIDS Fraud Video. Take a look at it for free. If you want the copy, we'll get it out to you. In the meantime, we're going to get on to other things such as 9/11, RFK. We talked about John F. Kennedy Jr., and I'm glad to be on the show with you, Popeye, again, as we explore another one of these dark moments in American history, and unfortunately there are way too many.
Well, Steve, during the break, I queued up another piece from RFK Must Die. The movie's like 2.5 hours long, but there's a clip I wanted the listeners to hear. And again, guys, this movie isn't like the final arbiter of it. It's just there's not a lot of information out there about RFK. So for those who are just getting into it, and you can go from, you can Google stuff, look up on different, alternative news websites. If you do enough research and digging, you'll find information. But for those who are just getting into it and really don't know, a good overview are these two documentaries, because you can sit and watch and then you can go research it from there, but you can take notes and you can go research it. That's what I would suggest you do. Sit down with a pad and a pen when you watch these documentaries and just take notes about things that stick out to you and go research it. And you'll be able to find, that this stuff it's not BS. It's the real deal. Anyway, the clip I want to play is you get to hear Sirhan, and it's under hypnosis. They have him reenact what happened, and it's important. The reason why I want to play this now is because the last segment I was playing the thing from Sandra Serrano, and she was talking about the girl in the polka dot dress. Well, this is Sirhan remembering under hypnosis what he could remember of that night, because he doesn't remember the shooting. He remembers he remembers what he did before and what he did after, but he doesn't remember that section of time. So you'll get to hear Sirhan right from his own mouth.
The problems Dr. Diamond had was that Sirhan couldn't remember the actual shooting of Robert Kennedy. So he put him under hypnosis and had him recreate the night of the assassination.
On Tuesday night, you've gone back to your car. You're tired.
Now, that's the guy you hear right now. That's Dr. Diamond.
You had 4 columns to drink. And you're too drunk to drive. And you go back to the car and you see the gun on the back seat. Do you remember?
I was hazy, Doctor. I was asleep.
Okay. Did you sleep?
Coffee.
He went back to the hotel in search of coffee and met a girl by a coffee urn.
She was sitting next to us.
To the coffee urn?
The coffee.
All right. Was she the one who gave you the coffee?
She's the one that asked for it.
She asked for the coffee. All right, then what?
And that's what I wanted. And I gave her a cup. And I made some for me.
Mm-hmm.
And we sat there.
What did you call the girl?
Hell, I don't know.
Did she tell you her name?
She was tired, too. She wanted coffee just as much as I did.
Mm-hmm. All right. Did she tell you her name? Do you remember asking her? What did you call her? Girl?
I don't know, sir. The coffee was all in discussion. Then she moved, and I followed her.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
She led me into a dark place.
Led you into a dark place. Was this where the teletype machine was?
I don't know.
What did she have in mind? What did you have in mind?
No, I was stealing it, that's all.
You told me before what was on his mind, that he hoped to be able to screw her afterwards. Was that right, Sam?
Well, yes, I was.
You guess you were.
Well, empty rooms down there.
What?
Empty rooms down there.
Empty rooms down there. You were thinking of taking her into one of the empty rooms? Why not? Sure, it makes sense. And then what?
Talk. Oh, hell, talk. A lot of lights, too. Oh, hell, a lot of lights.
This was consistent with what he said before, too. There were a lot of lights there, but he was in the dark.
As a policeman.
He's the one that had the funny uniform on, wasn't it?
Had a uniform.
But was it a policeman's uniform where you couldn't tell? It was probably a fireman, that's it. I see. And then what happened?
Damn.
Huh?
I was tired.
All right, you were tired.
I remember lying on the table, getting that coffee.
Lying on the table? Oh, putting coffee in the
I had my elbows on there.
On the elbows.
And I was just resting.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden I was choked.
Oh, wait, you skipped something. You skipped a lot. You were choked because something happened. You skipped a lot, Darren.
Well, hypnotize me again, though. It's on that part alone.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Try to go into a very light sleep. That's it. Now try to picture in your mind the scene. You're in the kitchen there. You're standing in the corner.
There are lots of people around, a lot of noise, and you see Kennedy coming. Now, what do you see, Sharon? Kennedy is coming towards you. Look at his face.
He's running. He's running at me.
Sharon, I order you to look at him. Open your eyes. Open your eyes, Sharon, and look at Kennedy. Don't shake your head. Look at him. You must remember. Sharon, that son of a bitch is coming. What do you see?
What's he doing here?
What?
What's he doing here?
What's he doing here? Go on. You're talking to Kennedy. Open your eyes and look at Kennedy. That son of a bitch has been verified by a witness. It's the first time I've talked about that. There he is, Sharon. Open your eyes. Are they choking you, Sharon? All right, Sharon, they're not really choking you. It's all right. Sharon, they're not really choking you. Sharon, open your eyes. You haven't shot him yet, Sharon. You haven't shot him yet. He's still there. You son of a bitch, you said, Sharon. What? He can't. He can't do what? He can't do what? He can't send the bomber. You're not going to let him, are you, Sharon? But you see him now. He's coming, Sharon. He's coming down the hall. Look at him, Sharon. Open your eyes. What? Come on, look at him. You cocksucker. Yeah, go on. You're reaching for the gun, Sharon. Are you reaching for your gun, Sharon? You can't do that. You can't send the bombers. Are you going to stop him, Sharon? Are you going to stop him, Sharon? Sharon, open your eyes and look at Kennedy. Where is your gun? Reach for it. Reach for it, Sharon. Reach for your gun. For the record, he is reaching spasmodically into the waistband of his pants on his left side. In a kind of crude kind of grabbing or gesture of reaching for the gun.
All right, guys, we're going to break. But I just wanted to play that clip for you really quick. You can ponder that. Think about what you just heard during the break. When we come back, I'll touch on it. You just heard Sirhan under hypnosis, remembering what he remembered. Does it sound like he was walking around and pissed off at Kennedy? Or does it sound like he was under some sort of mind control? We'll be right back.
It seems we're wasting away.
That's right. It's all the same. Only the names change. But their template is always the same. It's always the same crap.
Yeah.
Now, Steve, before we went into break, I played that clip. Does that sound like the stable mind of some guy that is pissed, some lone gunman that's going to go take out Kennedy, and he's a remorseless killer? Or does that sound like the fractured mind of a mind-controlled Manchurian candidate, for lack of a better term?
He's definitely got all the ingredients, the head injury, the shell-shocked childhood, somewhat dislocated and maybe a kind of a social misfit. And then, of course, now you add for Tom Collins and possibly poison coffee and some sort of extravagant, it looked like some sort of...
And Sirhan wasn't a drinker. So for Tom Collins, that's Tom Collins is a pretty powerful drink if made correctly. And if he had 4 of them and he's not a drinker, he's going to be already drunk. Then he kept drinking coffee. Who knows what they spiked the coffee with? And you heard him say, I was with the girl and I was just following her. So that's important because there you go. There's a connection from what Sandra Serrano said where she saw a girl in the polka dot dress, to Sirhan himself, under hypnosis, recanting that he was sitting with this girl in the polka dot dress.
Yeah. She's pretty observant, too. She says, of course, other people said this as well, what is a good-looking girl doing with this scumbag? There was actually 2 guys like Sirhan there that she was hanging around with, and they've all identified him. It just didn't look in place at all. She's well-dressed, a cute little Anglican gal with some sort of either Hispanic or, Palestinian, riffraff type people. It didn't make any sense at all.
Yeah, and they would have been his handlers. They would have made sure that he got into there. Okay, that was their duty. Obviously, Sirhan, they needed a mental midget. They needed a patsy that, Oswald had a brain in his head. They needed somebody that, was easily framed. They wouldn't have to kill him. They couldn't. If they had repeated exactly what they did with Oswald, then it would have showed their hand with JFK. So they had to alter it. And if you've noticed, they've used the retarded, mentally challenged type people ever since. Abdul Muttalib, the underwear bomber, Richard Reed, that moron, the shoe bomber, those idiots down here in Florida, the Miami 7, whatever the hell they were called. They all turned out to be mental midgets. So they go after these people that don't have a brain in their head and can be easily led around, and I don't want to say steered, because steered isn't even the right term. I mean, aimed. Aimed is a better term. Steered makes it sound like that they were, it implies that they were doing it on their own, whereas aimed is a better term, because it's the government that's controlling it, and they're just being used as the bullet, from the gun to take the fall. Oh my God, the terrorist! It's all BS, and it's the same thing. They have to find a mental midget, some sort of mentally challenged individual, because anybody with half a brain they'd have to kill. They had to kill Oswald, because if they had gotten him, if they tried setting him up and saying, he wouldn't, go to trial without opening his mouth. I'm sure Lee probably eventually would have opened his mouth and said something, although he was a pretty slick individual from the things that I've read about him and the research I've done on him. So who knows what he would have done. But I don't think he would have allowed himself to take the fall for Kennedy. But he also realized that they were going to kill him months before. He had talked about it. They couldn't go into that. They couldn't have that same type of thing. So you have a retarded individual, somebody that's mentally challenged. They're much easier controlled. And who knows, maybe at the time of the Kennedy assassination, they didn't have everything on par with Manchurian candidates. They did, 6 years later, or 5.5 years later, and, there you go. So they perfected the technology. Look, you couldn't make telephone calls on 9/11 from airplanes at 30,000 feet. And 4 years later, the technology came out to make them at 18,000 feet, and they were, 20,000 feet, and they were all bragging about it. So you see how over the course of a couple of years, technology does advance to do things. So.
Yeah, and you mentioned all these trained killers. You have Mark David Chapman and John Hinckley, which were virtually carbon copies of each other. Same kind of thing here. And they
didn't both of them read Catcher in the Rye, or was it just one that read Catcher in the Rye?
They both went through this somewhat of an extensive training and background, and both of them were mentally unstable. And the question is, how did they become the people that they were? There was no motive for either one of these shootings with John Lennon or Ronald Reagan, that other than just the same old lone gunman story that we're always told. Yet the political ramifications were always very, very big. Another thing that we probably should talk about, and I guess we'll probably get into it later, Popeye, is David Morales, Frank Sturgis, people like that.
Well, no, we should get into that. Let's touch on that, because that's important, especially because Sturgis and Morales were not only mentioned in the RFK assassination, but E. Howard Hunt in his deathbed confessions. If you go listen to E. Howard Hunt's deathbed confession, where he confesses to being part of the JFK assassination. He mentions, listen, I can't even speak tonight. He mentions David Morales and Frank Sturgis, both by name. as being involved in John F. Kennedy's assassination, and then you come to find out they're both involved in Bobby Kennedy's assassination.
Yeah. It's a little circle, isn't it? The same people keep popping up. And, of course, you know, as I've lived through a lot of these events, and, you know, before we go to the break, just say this, that it's getting worse and worse, friends, because, you know, don't let anybody tell you that 9/11 was just another one of those events. They have now turned literally millions of Americans into traitors with this official lie. That's what's happened here. I mean, everybody's complicit in it now. This isn't a little hand-picked group of people doing things with mind-controlled agents now. I mean, we got the mainstream media lying to us about everything. They should not be covering this at all, covering up at all, in other words.
Well, they should be reporting on it. They should be touching on it, but they don't talk about this kind of stuff. And back then, you know, the media, see, the difference between the media back then and now is the media wasn't as controlled, you know, 40 years ago. So certain things were leaked out. Now the media is complete propaganda. You know, back then you could at least get real news reports. Nowadays, they're not even news reports. It's just video news releases. VNRs, go look them up. They're real.
Yeah, you got to credit them. You got to credit him with at least one thing. At least Sirhan had a gun and he was shooting it. You know, and Mark David Chapman and John Hinckley.
Well, nowadays they've gotten lazy. They don't even try to frame things. They just lie to you and tell you what you saw didn't even happen. Back then, they at least tried to make it look real. I guess you're right. At least they put effort into it, is what you're saying, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, they put a lot of work into deception back in those days, and nowadays the people are so dumbed down that, you know, you can tell them with what they see, which is like World Trade Center 7 isn't what they see. Don't believe your lying eyes. That building came down because of heat expansion, not because of the explosives. You know, I mean, it's incredible how stupid people are now, where they can't even look at something like a 47-story building falling and realize it's controlled demolition. I mean, this is how far it's gone. People are that thick at this point now. I mean, they're really, really dangerous.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct, 110%. And it's important, again, to bring up Sturgis and Morales, because we're going to break in about 30 seconds. But before we get cut off by the break, it's important to remember, like I said, Sturgis and Morales are two key players. And in the 70s, when they were investigating the Senate subcommittee on assassinations and everything, right before he was going to testify, Sturgis had a heart attack, Morales had a heart attack and died. And he was like the number 2 man in the CIA. He only answered to the head of the CIA and the president. So interesting. We'll be right back.
But they don't even show the truth when soldiers are missing. I'm only trying to show.
We are back. We got another half hour, 2 more segments. Today we're discussing RFK. More importantly, his assassination. I couldn't fit all the good stuff Bobby did, and I'm not saying he was a saint, but I couldn't fit the good stuff he did after his brother's death into a 2-hour show. But Bobby was fundamentally a changed man, and he realized what was going on, and he realized that there was more at play than maybe what he had thought when he was younger. And you can tell he just wanted to. They were trying to effect change. The 60s were a very turbulent time. You know, Martin Luther King was assassinated. There were riots. You know, they were burning the Capitol. The Capitol had been burned. It was a very tumultuous time. They were on the verge of another civil war. So, it's kind of an incredible thing. We're at a crossroads like that again. Except now they're not assassinating people like they were back in the 60s. You know, you got to look at all those political assassinations and realize that they are connected in one way or another, because they were pulled off by this very same organized net of people.
That's right. Absolutely. You know, these are the folks who are behind it all, and this is what Bobby Kennedy was getting at. You know, we're at the same crossroads again right now with people waking up to this. I mean, even though I sometimes criticize the American public, a lot more people are waking up than we realize. They know something's wrong. And, you know, Popeye, the situation is very similar. We're in dangerous times here because when the people start to come around, they have to take drastic measures. And they've done that in the past, and they'll do it again.
Well, that's why I say that Ron Paul that old man needs to have he needs to take this a little more serious than he does. You know, sometimes I don't think he takes the threats as serious as he should. If he's going to run for president, you know, I'm not saying anything's going to happen to him, but I worry about the old man because I don't want to see nothing happen bad like that happen to anybody. But, you know, he poses that kind of threat to these people.
Absolutely. Yes,
he poses that Kennedy-esque threat to these people, and if they were willing to kill Bobby and John Jr., don't think that they won't kill him. You know, and I'm not trying to vex him or anything like that, but you have to be realistic about it and know that these evil bastards, they've done it once, though they could do it again. You know, they killed 3,000 people on 9/11, over 1 million people in the BS wars of aggression. You don't think that they wouldn't, you know, just add one more to the list. So he needs to take this a little more seriously than he is. At least that's my personal observation on it. He needs to take it a little more serious because you don't know what these people, you know, he can't be like, oh, those are just conspiracy theories. I mean, he needs to take a look at what's happened to people like Bobby Kennedy. Bobby would have won that election without a doubt. Without a doubt.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. John F. Kennedy Jr. would have won, too. You know, so they, like you said before, Popeye, on the show that we covered on that, they had to nip him in the bud before he even started his political career.
Yeah, they couldn't even let him. Well, look, see what they did with Bobby. They got him, and then they got Jack while he was in. They had to take him out while he was the president. Then they got Bobby before he could get into the presidency, even though he was already a politician, and that was still kind of a pain in the butt to cover up. But then John Jr. was easy. Plane crash, done. End of story.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I hope that Ron Paul picks a very strong running mate. The best insurance for any, you know, what I would call any extravagant person who's planning on doing anything to uncover all this mess is to get somebody who's even stronger than he is as a vice presidential candidate. We've always allowed people like Lyndon Baines Johnson, Andrew Johnson, George H. Walker Bush, people like that to get in behind the president. Anytime there's an attempt.
Well, that was Kennedy's undoing, was Johnson, dude.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I knew in 1964, which shows you how old I am. I was a youngster. I wasn't anywhere near being able to vote, but I remember we had a copy of a book called A Texan Looks at Lyndon. You may have heard of that book. And it talked about all the evil that Johnson had been involved in for many years down in Texas. And that was why the assassination took place.
And don't think that he didn't have his hand in it because he was still the president when Bobby was assassinated. So don't think that he didn't have his hand in it because he knew that if Bobby got into office, he knew that as soon as he got out, that Bobby would go after him and prosecute him, and he would go to jail. And Lyndon could not deal with that. So
we have some clips, don't we, of E. Howard Hunt and some of those?
Yeah, I have. Well, Hunt's deathbed confession, he mentions Morales and Frank Sturgis and David Morales. Listen, here's his deathbed confession, and this is about John's assassination. But remember, these are all connected. It's important to remember that fact. All this is interconnected.
I heard from Frank that LBJ had...
And Frank, meaning Frank Sturgis.
Designated Cord Meyer Jr. to undertake a larger organization while keeping it totally secret. Cord Meyer himself was a rather favored member of the Eastern aristocracy. He was a graduate of Yale University and had joined the Marine Corps during the war and lost an eye in the Pacific fighting. I think that LBJ settled on Meyer as an opportunist, Perrin like himself, Perrin, and a man who had very little left to him in life ever since JFK had taken Cord's wife as one of his mistresses. I would suggest that Cord Meyer welcomed the approach from LBJ, who was, after all, only the vice president at that time. And, of course, could not number Cord Meyer among JFK's admirers. Quite the contrary. As for Dave Phillips, I knew him pretty well at one time. He worked for me during the Guatemala project. He had made himself useful to the agency in Santiago, Chile, where he was an American businessman. In any case, his actions, whatever they were, came to the attention of the Santiago station chief. And when his resume became known to people in the Western Hemisphere Division, he was brought in to work on Guatemalan operations. Sturridge and Morales and people of that ilk stayed in apartment houses during preparations for the big event. Their addresses were very subject to change, so that where a fellow like Morales had been one day, he was not necessarily associated with that same address the following day. In short, it was a very mobile experience. Let me point out at this point that if I had wanted to fictionalize what went on in Miami and elsewhere during the run-up for the big event, I would have done so. But I don't want any unreality to tinge this particular story, or the information, I should say. I was a bench warmer on it, and I had a reputation for honesty. I think it's essential to refocus on what this information that I've been providing you, and you alone, by the way, consists of.
There you go. So you heard, now the confession goes on, you can look up the whole deathbed confession, but you just heard him talk, pretty much he named names, but do you see how he tied in Sturgis and Morales? And these two guys pop up again in Bobby's assassination when you go research it.
Yep, I sure do. Morales is one of the key figures. Another person that most people don't recognize that E. Howard Hunt mentioned was William Harvey, who was, if you actually Google online, Popeye, you can find what Bobby Kennedy had to say about him. He was the CIA department head in Rome. That's where he
I'm going to have you repeat that again when we come back in, just in case, because you might have gotten cut off by the bumper and stepped on a little bit. So when we come back, Steve, I'm going to have you repeat that piece of information again, because that's really important. Stay tuned, guys. We'll be right back. Well, welcome back. It's the final segment of Down the Rabbit Hole. This Wednesday, September 21st, 2011. I was joined today by my buddy Steve Stars. Steve was so gracious to join me. He actually had some major internet and telephone problems because he lives out in the middle of nomad land, and his internet's been down for a few days, and he was gracious enough to join me for 2 hours using a cancer-causing cell phone. So, quick little golf clap and round of applause for Steve. Thank you very much for coming on and hanging out with me.
Hey, my pleasure, and go ahead, buddy.
Steve, what were you getting into before we went into break? I want you to cover that again because you got cut off by the bumper. Tell the listeners what you were talking about.
Well, we've been talking quite a bit about who the CIA really is, okay? As a lot of people don't understand, the CIA really isn't an agency that the president relies upon. It's a group of people who work their own agenda around him, and if he doesn't cooperate, they quickly get the president out of the way. This has been going on for quite some time, and we know the director, of course, was Leon Panetta. He's now Secretary of Defense. He's been replaced by General Petraeus, David Petraeus. His position following in was a guy by the name of John Allen. You look at James Clapper, our spy czar. All of these people,
all Jesuit trained.
Yeah, all of them are trained, and they all go through this, the Edmund Walsh School of Foreign Service at Georgetown. That's where Bill Clinton was as well. And then, of course, John Kerry, Joe Biden, all of these people are Jesuit trained. You have Nancy Pelosi, John Boehner. So if Ron Paul does get elected, he wants to get rid of the CIA, but you're going to have to look at exactly who these people are and what they're doing. In this case, we were talking about Bill Harvey right before the break. Bill Harvey's also been connected to both the Kennedy assassinations and was the CIA chief there in Rome after the Kennedys demoted him. Now, he built that tunnel, apparently, with the periscope, the kind of thing that you probably saw in, From Russia with Love, some kind of a special secret operation, which I understand he probably had access to do through the spy network that's international. But, it earned him some brownie points. And the Kennedys did not like this guy. They demoted him. So he was another party of this whole international cartel, this Brotherhood of Darkness, if you like, that runs the Central Intelligence Agency. And as we heard before with that interview with Sandy Serrano, this is the kind of pressure that they use. This is what Gitmo is like. This is the 21st century Inquisition here is what's going on. And these are the people who are running it, and they're destroying your republic. They've vowed to do that. They have been actively involved in all this for many years. They're being exposed. They're quite frightening. And at the same time, they're running scared because they know they're in trouble. This is not probably 80% of Catholics because most Catholics have no idea of what's going on. They wouldn't stand for it. But this cartel will even kill popes, and they have in the past. I believe John Pope I was assassinated because he wanted to settle down and set affairs right with the Rupe and the Jesuits back then. So, a lot of people don't understand how this cartel works, but they're one part of a very big part of the New World Order. And I really appreciate the work that you've been doing, Popeye, the boldness you've taken to identify this situation, because this is what we're up against here.
Well, it's important, dude. People have to understand what's going on, and it's not. Steve doesn't mean it's the Catholics and like Catholics down the street, the little old Catholic lady, but the Catholic Church itself, the Vatican is its own little country, and they don't look. They're not Christians, okay? They pretend to be Christians. And that's why they're really good at giving Christians a bad name, because a lot of people associate, if you're Christian, you touch kids and everything else. No. And I'm not defending, any religion. I think they're all mind prisons. But the Catholic Church, these guys are evil. They're a special kind of evil. Okay? The Pope walks around with a wooden little cross in his hand all the time. It's a satanic symbol. It's called a double cross. It's got two crosses on it. Did you ever look at the Exxon, the X and Exxon? Look at it. Tilt your head a little bit to the left and look at it. It's a double cross. It's the same symbol. Jordan Maxwell talks about this stuff. He shows you how they put some of the symbols in corporate, advertising and stuff right in your face, and corporate logos and stuff. But the double cross, go look it up. It's a satanic symbol. It's a curved it's not little. It's probably like 12 inches long. But it's a curved wooden cross, and it's got two crosses on it. It's a satanic symbol. And this dude walks around with, in his hand. And people are so naive, they have no idea. They don't pay attention. Oh, it's the Pope. It's the Pope. That big fish hat he wears? This is a whole other show in itself. That big tall hat that they call the Pope hat, that's a fish head. That represents Dagon. That goes back to Babylon and Nimrod worship. I mean, I couldn't make this up if I wanted to. And these are the people, they have it doesn't matter if we believe in it or the listeners believe in it. These sick bastards believe in it, and they pull off their little shenanigans, and this stuff is their basis of thinking, of where they think they get their power from. Whether it's true or not, we don't know. We'd have to investigate all the crazy things that they think and they believe in. But obviously they have access to information that we don't. So maybe there is something to some of the stuff that they talk about. But we'll never know unless we get into, like, the Vatican archives. I say that all the time. You want to know the truth, you got to get into the Vatican archives.
Yeah, they killed Catholics too. I mean, that's why they killed the Kennedys. Of course,
the Kennedys were Catholic. They shot them both.
Right. They killed the Pope. I believe they killed Pope John Paul I. Clement XIV, who banned the Jesuits in 1773, was poisoned shortly thereafter. Okay, so this group of people, they operate behind the Pope much like the way the CIA operates behind the president. If the president or the Pope do not cooperate, they get rid of them. So they're a little cartel, an oligarchy, if you like, of people who run things behind the scenes. And they are essentially the Brotherhood of Darkness. That's who has your country right now. They operate your country. They operate all the security devices. You like having people patting you down at NFL games or every place you want to go? That's who's doing this. This is the 21st century Inquisition. That's what it is. And we're a part of that right now. Now, we can either pretend like this is all conspiracy theory and ignore 500 years of history. I'm talking about history. How many people do you
go look up Ignatius Loyola? Right.
Yeah, going all the way back till the beginning of this entire operation. In 1540, Ignatius Loyola, people like that. But it was even prior to that with the Borgias, and times prior to that.
Well, you see, all this stuff goes back to the black nobility families, and even further. It's not just the Jesuits themselves. It's just even the Jesuits at their base and the Black Pope and everything. They're being used by somebody higher up the food chain, But they are a major factor in this. They are. Then that leaving out the Jesuit connection to certain things would be like not talking about the Rothschilds. How could you leave them out? You can't. Steve, we got a few minutes left. What do you think? RFK, we need to get the word out. It's still important because, why? Why do you think it's important to get the word out about Bobby's assassination?
Well, I think, Popeye, we've emphasized this very clearly through the program, that we are living in very similar times with similar candidates. We're seeing the same thing happen right now. If Ron Paul is for real and collecting the kind of notoriety and popular support that we're led to believe after, pulling down, about 43, 44, 49% of the straw votes, I understand that Perry backed out of the debate and the big premiere of the candidates in Texas because he was afraid he was going to get whipped there, which he would have. I mean, it's like the Republicans don't have anybody. Nobody likes Romney. Perry's obviously a globalist. He's not going to sell. So the only candidate the Republicans have is Ron Paul. And unfortunately, look at Obama for the Democrats. I mean, he's completely lackluster at best and a complete failure. He's a nobody. I would be surprised if the Democrats are going to run him again. I don't want to get into political candidates and politics too far ahead, but the point is right now, friends, this is where the selection process takes place. It'll be virtually over by the first of the year.
And we were at about the same place we are now when they shot Bobby.
Yep. That's right.
It was in the same thing. They were going through the primaries. He hadn't been picked as the nominee yet, but they knew he would have made it, and they had to kill him because if he had gotten and kept winning, which he was, he would have gotten the Democratic nomination, and then he would have hands down kicked the crap out of Richard Nixon. And they couldn't take that chance again because Jack had kicked Nixon's ass the first time and came in out of nowhere. they couldn't risk it again, and they knew that with Jack being shot and Bobby being so popular, that he would have rode that wave in. They couldn't have fixed the election, and that's it. Steve, we're out of time as always. Thanks for coming on the show again, and doing a third assassination special about the Kennedys. But there's so much information, it's got to get out there. Guys, thanks for joining me. I'll see you again on Friday. Make sure you check out RFK Must Die, and look on YouTube for the Assassination of RFK as a starting point. Thanks for hanging out. See you Friday.